Hi and welcome to ECCB Connects. Yesterday, March 8th, was celebrated as International Women's Day under the campaign theme, Break the Bias. On this week's program, Deputy Governor Dr Valda Henry shares her perspectives on what can be done to forge equity for our region's girls and women.
Imagine a world free of bias.
Let's break the bias.
Imagine a world free of discrimination.
We must break this bias.
Imagine a world free of stereotypes.
Imagine a world where difference is valued and celebrated.
Together, we can forge women's equality.
We can break the bias.
Thanks for staying connected with us. Dr. Henry, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you, Shomalan. It's good to be here, and I want to use the opportunity to say good day to all our viewers.
Great. Yesterday was celebrated as International Women's Day under the theme Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. The focus was on climate change and the contribution of women and girls to climate change adaptation, mitigation, response, and building a sustainable future for all. However, the tagline was Break the Bias. Now, what are some of the major biases you have witnessed in, let's start with the home, and that will naturally spill over to the community?
There have been some biases against women from time immemorial that continues today. There is always a bias that there's certain work that is girls' work and boys' work, so the women are deemed to be in charge of the home. And so almost all work related to the home is sometimes assigned to women. Parents themselves have been very protective of their girls, and so while they allow their boys to go out and be free, girls are generally held at home. They are kept under strict scrutiny to be home. They have very tight curfews to be home by 5, home by 6, before the sun goes down. There were biases before in terms of what girls could do, even in terms of careers. Fortunately, however, that to a large extent, I think, has ended, at least in the Caribbean, where girls now are in almost every field that we can think of. And there's a real strengthening of girls to be in STEMs. So I think that bias about career is gone. But there's still biases against expectations of how girls should behave, even in terms of relationships. Men are encouraged to have multiple partners and relationships. And we don't, if not encourage, but we don't cast such a dim view of men. But let a woman have even one or two. They don't even have to be together. Sometimes, you see aspersions cast against a woman's character. Those are some of the biases that I think still exist to a large extent. But I want to also talk about another bias that girls in particular face. We know that there is, in fact, now the reporting of it is even more, and maybe because now there is, more transparency in terms of abuse against girls and women. But I want to focus on girls because girls are really the vulnerable sector. Girls are, oftentimes underage, yet whenever there is a allegation of sexual abuse or inappropriate sexual behaviors, you find so much blame is ascribed to the girl. And oftentimes it's women doing the blaming, saying that they were too fast, they shouldn't be there. And while, yes, they may have precocious children, I'm not saying no. But I always say a child could come on a golden platter to an older person. Man, he has to say no. We do not hold men to that same level of scrutiny And that in particular has to change, because the data continues to show that there is a really high incidence of abuse against girls.
What about in the workplace?
In the workplace, you have some of these biases. Well, do I say in the Caribbean, those biases are not as strong as worldwide? Because worldwide, you know, when you look at the data, it says just about 26.8% of women are in senior positions, management positions worldwide. That data does not pertain in our region, because if you look around, women actually in a number of our countries are the majority in terms of leadership, whether it's in the government sector, whether it's in the private sector. And in fact, we've seen an increasing number of women participating in national politics who are members of parliament. I think Dominica maybe has one of the highest percentage of women. But you still do have some of that workplace where you think that there's certain jobs too that are not as where we have a small percentage of women who are in that workplace. We also have areas where sometimes some women would like to be in, but they're like, oh no, it's too strenuous, it's heavy duty, and so women are discouraged from participating in that. But I don't think, because I'm not aware, although I've done quite a number of work across the region, I'm not aware in our Caribbean where women are paid differently for the same work. I think throughout the Caribbean we have at least gotten that correct, that there's really equal pay for equal work. So when you hire an accountant, whether it's a male or a female, and that is in the private sector, that's in the public sector, there is a scale and we fit into that scale. So I don't think, again, in our region, we have that type of inequality in the workplace as we have. In terms of sexual advances, you maybe still have that. Though right now, I'll say to you, the Caribbean, you can see a crackdown in that, where a lot of organizations have policies against sexual molestation, sexual harassment, and such that sometimes you find that men now are even afraid to give a compliment to a woman because they don't want to be accused of inappropriate sexual behavior. So I think a lot of organizations in the Caribbean have made quite a big stride in making the workplace a place of equal opportunity and a place of equity in terms of the genders.
Right. So the region is moving in the right direction in terms of erasing these biases, but we still do have some work to do.
Yes.
Okay. For International Women's Day, one of the calls is for us to imagine a gender equal world. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Shamalan, I have gotten myself into some trouble about that already. I don't believe in gender equality. I believe in gender equity. Because equality says same access, you know. And while yes, there must be equal opportunities for education, for healthcare, and all of those things, I think when we start talking about gender equality, we're assuming we are in the same place and given the same resources. And that may not be the right thing. Let us say gender equality. And so let us say, take for women, we say we want a gender equal world. So we want a woman to have equal access to education. Let's just take it as an example. And so we're saying we are going to make the same provisions. But what about a woman who may be physically challenged, who may be emotionally challenged? If we're going to give equal access, it means we must give the same type of resources. And that may not be enough. But if we start focusing on gender equity, we take people where they are and we give them the resources that they need. And you'll find that some will need more resources than others in order to then have parity, so they can then compete equally. And so if we have a disabled girl, we ensure that there is access for, to enter the school. If we say we have a child who is challenged, either the child is blind or the child is, deaf, we have special resources. And not necessarily in a little place where they're kept by themselves. In mainstream schools, we have the resources so that they too have the equal opportunity to be their best selves and to be what they want. And I must say, though I'm not supposed to stress anything, but I'll say that Dominica has started that, where we at least have 2 students, and one actually is at university, I'm not sure if he has graduated, where he was yes, I think he was blind. And they had a teacher assigned to him, a special teacher assigned to him, who helped with all of his classes. He did excellently at CXC. He's now at the university. That is an example of equity, gender equity, providing what is needed to get that person the equal opportunity to compete like everyone else. So I think we need to focus a little bit more on gender equity rather than gender equality. Because I say to you, even God does not believe necessarily in equality, but he believes in equity. While we are all born in the image and likeness of God, equal, we have different talents. And when they did the story in Matthew 25, when the talents were being divided, they were not given equal talents. They were given each according to his ability. And that says we have different abilities. But in order for us to have the same opportunity, it must be matched to our abilities and to our circumstance. So you see, one got 1, 4, and 10, but they all had the equal opportunity to go and invest and come back. Also in that is how were they assessed. The one who got 4, the 2 did not expect to have 10, but the one who got 5, but what they were expected to do was to double it. And they had the equal opportunity to double it. And we know what happened to the one who got his 1 and did nothing about it because he was then woeful. And so I think it behooves all of us to ensure that we provide equity, circumstances, meet people where they are, to then give them the equal opportunity to compete on the same playing field.
So you're saying we really need to reframe the narrative and the thinking when it comes to equality and equity, and we must focus on equity.
Yes, I say that. Equity to provide equal opportunities.
Great. Now let's look at continuing this whole issue of equity. What do you think can be done then to forge greater equity for our girls and women?
Again, Shawana, I think we have to look at circumstances. And so in terms of opportunities for girls and for women, where are persons? And I think that is where deeper studies need to be done to ensure that a child who comes from a home where parents are less fortunate, who is bright, does not get left behind just because her parents do not have the financial resources. And so when we are providing services, we need to do some maybe more needs-based analysis so we meet persons where they are. I think we need greater studies, greater research, rather than just blanketing everything, taking everything on a blanket level. And sometimes too, on the international blanket, we need to look at our own circumstances. More research needs to be done in the circumstances of our individual Caribbean territories so that we can then target our responses to meet people where they are. And then we give the equity to provide equal opportunities. I must admit that some governments and most of our countries, if not all, are doing that, because when we see some of the areas where scholarships are going, we recognize now there is a thrust by our governments to provide that kind of equal opportunity by providing an equitable basis for the distribution of scholarships. But I think more needs to go into that. When it comes to healthcare, I think that's where we see it the most. And that is where we really need some more work to do. We over and over, we see this. Right now, GoFundMe used to be something for the US. Right now, GoFundMe is almost the craze. To me, every time you turn, almost every day, there's a different GoFundMe to meet a need for someone in our region. So, again, what do we need to ensure that every person, all persons have the same access to good quality health? Can't be good health and so longevity of life only for the persons who have money and who can fly themselves to different countries where they can get the best care. We need to really begin, and that's why for me, I'm a strong proponent of national health coverage, national health insurance. I'm a strong proponent for that. And many of our countries have started the study, thought about it, but have not really implemented it in a full way. I know Antigua has a national health, insurance. The MBS, it's called Medical Benefit Scheme, where they provide at least access for persons with some of the NCDs. But we need to go beyond that. in terms of providing true health care and meeting the needs, for early diagnosis. We now have persons who, we have late diagnosis. Why? Oftentimes, those persons are unable. They know they're sick, but they don't have the monies to go and seek medical attention, even in 2022. And so by the time they do get there, it's too late. And so we really need, that's another area, I think. And I think that's one of the big areas, because our health, and COVID has demonstrated that so well for us. Our health is our wealth. And then, of course, the small business sector, because the studies continue to show the small business sector is the backbone of economic growth. And again, providing access to capital, because that is one of the biggest drawbacks that small businesses have. Access to capital to provide for their growth and their expansion.
Let's just backtrack to as we wrap up, to the tagline, break the bias. One message, if you were to give a message to the people of our region, because everybody has to be involved to break this bias. What would this message be to the people of our region to break the bias or the biases that are affecting girls and women?
My message in terms of breaking the bias is to stop judging and condemning. I think as a region, we need to become a bit more empathetic. We need to care and show concern. Get to know the story before coming to a judgment. And it's judgment that leads to biases. And if we're able to hold back our judgment because we seek out knowledge, we seek out information, and then we get understanding. Because if you understand someone, Sherlock, you may not agree with what they do, but if you understand them, you're actually able to assist them to get to where you think they need to be. But ultimately, it's greater understanding to ensure that we can begin to break the bias, to see and take people where they are, and to encourage them by, in some cases, providing a listening ear, some cases resources, to become the person that they want to be. I think that ultimately would be my message.
Dr. Henry, thank you very much for speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
Shimalan, thank you for having me, and happy International Women's Day to you and to all the women in our ECCU as well as worldwide. And I just pray that as we travel along in 2022, we remember the tagline, to break the bias. So that will also remind us that we too must break the biases that we have towards others.
And now for this week's financial tip.
Pay yourself first. You've heard that one before. That's because that is the best way to save money. Try to put away at least 10% of each paycheck. If you can't manage 10%, try 5%. Anything is better than nothing, and you'll be surprised at how easy it is.
Here's where we end this week's episode of ECCB Connects. We encourage you to do whatever you can to break the bias. Join us next week when we'll bring you part 2 of our conversation on our region's social security systems.